for sisters from the Order of St. Anne to move to Kentucky, to Versailles, Kentucky, and they offered them the Margaret Hall School, which was a boarding school for girls. By 1930, Sisters of the Order of St. Anne had accepted that offer and had moved to Kentucky and began teaching at the school. They were administrators and were fully involved in the running of the school. By the early 1940s, there were 9 sisters of the Order of St. Anne who were running the Margaret Hall School, and they began to long for a more monastic life, and they were interested in getting involved in different ministries, not only in teaching. So gradually, over the course of several years, these 9 sisters connected with the Order of the Holy Cross, the men's community in West Park, New York. And the Order of the Holy Cross helped them with the process of forming a new community. So these 9 sisters became Sisters of the Order of St. Helena. They were going to be the Sisters of the Order of Sisters of the Holy Cross, but with a slightly independent streak. They decided they didn't want to do that. And, well, who found the true cross? St. Helena. So they became the Order of St. Helena. And she has turned out to be an excellent patron saint for us because she was feisty into her old age. So I hope we continue in her tradition. So sisters, I think one sister did stay at the Margaret Hall School and continue to teach, but others moved first to Helena, New Jersey, and then eventually by about 1950, they were at Vales Gate, New York. Now, one of the really, I think, distinct features of the Order of St. Helena was that from our founding, we have tried to balance the common good of the members of the order with the rights of the individual, the rights and needs of the individual. I think it's a lot more common in religious orders to tend on the side of conformity and of a formation process, which the ideal is to turn out a sister of such and such a community. The Sisters of the Order of St. Helena are real, I think from the beginning, have been real individuals. And we have celebrated individual ministries, individual personalities, and that, of course, makes for difficulties. It's not always smooth sailing, and not always easy to find the right balance between the rights of the community as a whole and the needs and wants of an individual. And of course, part of that is determining what are needs and what are wants or druthers. So is it your druther that we do this, or is it a real need that we do it that way? So for example, I think we were one of the first to take off the veil. And this is a story that is true. One of my sisters was actually at the General Convention. She was in the ladies' room, in the stall in the ladies' room, and she overheard 2 other sisters from other communities talking about the Order of St. Helena and saying, those sisters, because we didn't wear the veil, and that was a big deal. Today, most of the women's communities do not require the veil. So that's been a gradual process that I think we kind of started it. So when we were founded in 1945, the superior of the Order of the Holy Cross was our superior. And that was a time when, men were still, needed to be in charge of what women were doing. And it was actually several decades before we sisters, I wasn't in the community at the time, we sisters decided that enough was enough and that we were big girls and we were going to have our own superior. Um, the Order of St. Helena Sisters have always, from at the time of our founding, chosen individual ministries. We have had hospitality as a common ministry, but each sister is able to discern, and with conversation, we don't just go off and do whatever, but each sister is encouraged to develop her own ministries and her own interests. So we've been involved in peace and justice efforts. I was very fortunate to go on 6 peace delegations. 2 were to Afghanistan and 4 to Iran. My most recent one was in 2008. And it's something that I don't think I would have done if I had not been a member of the order, because I could go as part of the order, and I also am not working a full-time job, so I had the time to do things like that. During and just after World War II, the sisters who were connected with the Margaret Hall School brought over Jewish orphans, girls, and sponsored them at a time when that was not commonly done. They protested the Vietnam War. We have always been supportive of LGBTQ community. And in our house in Augusta, which was founded, I believe, around 1960, there were either 4, 5, 6 sisters living there. And about 30 years ago, the Metropolitan Community Church, which you may know is a LGBTQ focused and LGBTQ friendly church denomination, they were looking to found a congregation in Augusta, Georgia. And they had checked in with a number of different congregations, and nobody would sponsor or host them. And I'm so proud of my sisters because back that long ago, they said, sure, come and use our chapel, use our meeting space. So we were sort of midwives for their congregation. We still have a relationship with them. Over the years, we've had sisters from different races and different backgrounds and different nationalities. It is a usual thing for a community to have a group. They may have a ministry in a country and have groups of people from that country. So the Sisters of St. Margaret have a ministry in Haiti, and they have a group of Haitian sisters. But we have had sisters from a number of different places, which has challenges. I won't say that we've always done it well, but we have really made an effort to be inclusive in that area. So I'm giving you a little bit of background and sort of tooting our horns a little bit as being progressive and open to work for peace and justice. And I think that foundation was part of what got us into the St. Helena Breviary and revising our Psalter. When I entered the Order of St. Helena in 2000, I was first in the house in New York City, and there were 4 of us living there, so it was a really pretty small community. And one of the sisters there just said, I'm just so tired of all this male language in the Psalms and of talking of God as he. And so she started herself working on the Book of Common Prayer Psalter and making changes where God was referred to as a male. So being only 4 of us there, we could experiment with what we were doing in our saying the daily office. Now, I entered OSH directly from seminary, and I was going to take or had already taken an ordination vow as a diaconate that I was going to uphold the Book of Common Prayer. And so I had some doubts about this because this was changing scripture and it was changing the Book of Common Prayer. And one day in our chapel, we prayed morning prayer, our matins, with all inclusive language. The whole service, everything was inclusive language. And it felt kind of like a safe space. It felt like a deeper way of breathing into the Psalter. And then, since I was a deacon and not yet a priest, we had visiting priests come in to celebrate for us. So a man priest came in, blessed be God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And it was such a startling, abrupt shift in the language that I was hooked. I was totally on board with this. The whole community decided to move forward with revising our breviary. We shared a breviary with the Order of the Holy Cross. The breviary, in a sense, is our prayer book for the daily offices. And so we decided that we were going to do a revision. We set up a committee, and we had a sister who had a master's in music composition, which was really helpful. We have 3 sisters who are poets, 2 who were ABD in English literature. I had just come out of seminary with 3 years of Hebrew, of which I don't remember very much, but at the time I was pretty up on my Hebrew, or at least I knew how to look it up. And we had a sister who was a proofreader, who had worked professionally as a proofreader. So we had a pretty A-team, committee to work on this. And what was absolutely fascinating was we would working on the language and come up with something that we thought was really good in committee. And then we would try it out in the chapel, and it would be a whole different experience. We'd say, yeah, back to the drawing board. So it was a reiteration process of working in the committee and then praying it in the chapel. And we would print out the entire breviary. Now, the published breviary is not brief. It's almost 900 pages. So we had notebooks that had the widest possible spines, and we would photocopy the whole thing so that we could actually pray through this whole revised breviary for a year and then send in our comments, and the sister who was the owner of the document would make the corrections. We'd print the whole thing out and then pray it for another year. What we also realized early on was we had to establish basic principles, because we got a lot of, I've never liked that verse, so could we change it? And we decided that that was not going to be helpful. So what we said was, we're going to look at the gender issues. We're going to look for inclusive language for people. So something like watchmen, we changed to sentries, and it's also 2 syllables. So it fits the rhythm of the chant. And we would use expansive language for God. And early on, we made a decision not to switch from God he and God she, but we were just going to get rid of the gender designations for God. Sometimes we looked at the theology. If it was a particularly, we worms kind of theology, we would lighten that up a little bit. We had a hymn for the matins morning prayer service that talked about the sun rebukes our sleepy eyes. And we decided, the sun lifts us up and brings us into, but we didn't need to be rebuked first thing in the morning. So we worked on that. We tried to make as few changes as possible to the Psalter. Sometimes we had to change the third person he to you. And so it would mean that sometimes even within one psalm, the person changes from God, he did this, he did that, to, oh God, you take care of us and you watch over us, or whatever. And we would change it all to you. So it was, God, you do this, you do that, you take care of us. I was once talking to a chaplain who said that he always used the St. Helena Psalter when he was going to visit patients, because he said the language of prayer to God was so powerful when he was working with the patients, rather than switching between a conversation about God, which is when we say God, he did this and he did that, we really are talking to each other about God, rather than a prayer that is all directed to God. Yeah, so we also were worried about, I still had the concern about changing scripture. And I think of it as similar to the paraphrasing of scripture that happens in the hymnal, it happens in canticles, that uses the words of scripture to turn it into a prayer, or that it'll fit the music, or that will work in a worship setting. So I myself like to consider what we've done as, this is the little St. Helena Psalter. This is not a study guide to the Hebrew scripture, but it is a prayer resource that can support us and get us out of the mindset of the male image of God. So what we have is not only the Psalter, which is published by Church Publishing, we also have the personal edition of the St. Helena Breviary, which does not have any of the music. It has the entire Psalter arranged in the back, and most of, or a lot of what's in the monastic breviary, but not all of it. Then that was all. The personal edition is also published by Church Publishing. The monastic breviary, the big kahuna, has the music, which is the medieval chant, the four-line music. And this is what we use in our chapel. This is out of print. We did a private publishing of this. It's out of print. We've sold all the extra copies that we had. But I am starting a new project, because this was published in 2005. And over the course of 20 years, we've found more, even though we were praying the whole thing through, I think at least twice for a whole year, we found things that we wanted to change. For example, the propers for Holy Innocents were, they were, I think there's a hymn that talks about, it's okay because all the pretty little babies are playing around the altar in heaven. And I really, oh. So we've changed, we redid the whole thing to reflect more the realities of war and the suffering of children and women who are in war, and also acknowledging the story of what Herod did and what's in the Bible. So I think it's a much more contemporary approach to that. We've adjusted some of the music. Our dear sister, who had a master's in music composition, sometimes got carried away. And we had, things that, were a little much, or were difficult to sing for those of us not quite so advanced in music. Since then, I have taken some courses in music theory, so I can adjust things a little bit. Not anything fancy, but we can make adjustments. So we have our first volume is out. It's just the Compline, but it has the complete office of Compline, including the music. And this is available from Amazon. Volume 1, Revised Monastic Edition. I'm currently working on Volume 2, which will be the ordinary of the office. So it will be a complete volume that somebody could purchase, and they could pray the ordinary time of the office, including Sunday propers, but not the seasonal Lent and Eastertide and so on, and and so that will be a separate volume, and the saints, propers and commons of saints, will be a separate volume. So I think there'll be 4 volumes altogether. Um, I have served on well, first of all, we're delighted that the St. Helena Breviary Psalter is being used in many churches throughout the church. And I think it's part of the right song or right word from church publishing. So if you subscribe to that, you will get the St. Helena Psalter in electronic form. And we also have a little sort of giveaway of a CD with the Psalter and the Breviary in an electronic form, which is through our website. I'm not trying to sell things here. I'm just trying to show you what the different end products are. I did serve on there was a standing, no, it wasn't a standing committee. It was an ad hoc committee on liturgy and prayer book revision. We sort of were alongside the standing committee on liturgy and music. And it was a fantastic experience. I really enjoyed being part of that project. And I got myself on the committee so that I could have inclusive and expansive language part of the conversation. For us, we're delighted that churches are using our breviary, but I think our most important concern is that people consider the language that we use in worship. I don't feel like it has to be our breviary, our Psalter, but to really, language in worship really matters, and lifting up the contributions of women. Now, I'm old enough that I grew up with the 28 prayer book. And even as a little kid, listening to the Eucharistic prayer that's had a phrase, for us and for all men, he came down from heaven, so blah, blah, blah. And I remember asking one of the priests at my church about that, and he said, oh, well, men, that includes women. And I thought, no, not really. Especially when it's a male priest saying it, I don't feel included in that. So the language that we use in worship really matters. And I think it's an important part of the Episcopal Church women history, that we have moved forward with prayers, with language work in worship, to make it more inclusive, not only for women, but for all people. As part of that ad hoc committee, we had representatives from a number of different ethnic groups, and they also had things to say about translations into Spanish and the use of language that will be useful and really edifying in their communities. So I think I'll stop. I could go on talking, but I'll stop, and I'd love to hear what questions you have. And you can ask me anything about religious life or about anything.
Thank you so much. That's great. And I think everyone's at church publishing website right now trying to order breviary. So there's a couple questions. How have the changes been received by bishops and other clergy?
Particularly in the language,
Mm-hmm.
the language. Um, quite varied. I think a bishop does need to give, or is supposed to give, permission for a congregation to use anything other than the VCP. And I had my first bishop, when I was ordained, had a lot of pushback against what is the Order of St. Helena doing? When are you doing this? And I just said, I'm under obedience to the Order of St. Helena. So when I'm at the Order of St. Helena, that's what we do. And I think it's been mixed. Some bishops, are really enthusiastic and really, even promote it and to promote religious life. And some I think are probably not so open to it.
Which leads to the next question. How can we assist encouraging parishes to support people discerning their call to joining an Episcopal order?
Oh, I love it. Love that question. So for a number of years, I had noticed that the Roman Catholic Church has a day of prayer for vocations and all that sort of thing. And I thought, so why aren't we doing that? So over the years, I kept pushing for having a Sunday for religious life. And everybody said, oh, it's too expensive. Oh, we can't do it. That'll never pass General Convention, blah, blah, blah. So finally, I decided I'm just going to do it. And we put forward a resolution. I think it was the 2000, I think it was during the pandemic. We put forward a resolution for Religious Life Sunday, which is the third Sunday in Epiphany. And I talked to some of the people organizing this, and we put it forward in a way that said we do not want any money. We don't want to change the calendar. We're not asking for any committee action. Actually, we're not asking for anything. Just say yes, and we'll take care of it from there. So it passed. So we have Religious Life Sunday. We have a website, religiousLifeSunday.net, which now I'm getting to the main point, not only an encouragement to celebrate that Sunday in parishes and for religious to get out and promote who we are on that Sunday. But it also, the website has resources like links to, we've done a series of videos about religious life. We've just done a series of 4 videos that include both the religious orders and the Christian communities. And we talk about what are the similarities and differences. So the religious orders are the communities that live together, take vows of poverty, and we literally do give up all that we own, and celibate chastity and obedience. The Christian communities take vows and they interpret them appropriately for people living in the world. So most of them don't live together. They may have families, and they don't give up all their possessions, but they manage their possessions in a way that is, good stewardship. So there are resources on that website that can help to promote religious life. Invite a sister or a brother to come and talk to, or do a Zoom call. I've done many adult forum kind of things for people all over the country that we can do on Zoom. So that's a way to get out there to places that we can't afford to go in person. And if you have other questions, I'd love to talk to you more about how to do that, because we do need new members. We need supporters, we need associates, and we need people to come. It's not just to have more members of our orders, but to have more people connect with us, and things like this. I'd love doing this.
Well, thank you.
Get the word out.
Well, thank you for joining us. But so do you see any increase, like maybe ever since the General Convention resolution has passed, or do you see any increase or decrease in general in the interest of religious orders?
Right. So I think this is still building. This is a celebration that will come around every year. And every year I notice more hits on the website. and more connections on the, we also advertise it on the Episcopal News Service. So I think the awareness and the exposure is growing. And I think we still have quite a ways to go to get the word out there. When I'm out and about, I still have people say, "Oh, we can't. You can't be. We don't have them." And that we're still getting that kind of a response is
Mhm.
sad. But I think we would have more vocations if more people knew that we existed
Mhm.
and knew what we were like.
Mhm.
There are so many misconceptions about religious life. And in some of these videos that are on the website, we try to dispel the idea, oh, how could you give up so much?
Mhm.
And I feel like I've gotten back 1,000 times more than I ever gave up.
Mm. I think you just answered the next question, which was apart from awareness, what do you find to be the biggest barrier to entry into religious orders, finances, perceptions? Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, I think school debt is a big problem. And I've very different communities have handled that in various ways. And some say, you've got to pay off your debt before you can enter. Some have assumed the lowest possible payment on the debt. There is or there was, who knows now, but there was a plan for, if you pay the minimum amount for 25 years, then the rest is forgiven. Um, and I don't know if that's going to change. So that is a difficulty for sure. And I think, yeah. Anyway, I'll just say that. And I think the misconceptions about religious life, frankly, um, we get inquiries from clearly people who want to be taken care of. They think, oh, I can join a religious order and I won't have to work. I won't have to, I'll just be taken care of. And this is a hard life. This is not easy. And living with my 8 wonderful sisters whom I love dearly, and they drive me crazy sometimes. I mean, we're human beings. So I think those are, and not being aware of
Mhm.
how wonderful this life is for those who are really called to it.
And there was a comment about how Saint Helena's Psalter is used daily at the Benedictine Way, and it's associated Incarnation
Mhm.
Monastery in Omaha,
Yeah.
Nebraska. And a dear friend of mine has been a lay member of the Order of St. Helena for many years, says Angela Hawk Brewer.
Uh-huh.
And Tammy Lassen also said, I'm in a, uh, she's, I don't know how to read that. She's Order of St. Benedictine, I'm assuming, with Brother James in Omaha.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic
I
work they're doing.
My question for you is you're also an ordained priest, and there was a question about whether you could serve also as a deacon. So being a priest and also being a sister, how does that experience has been for you?
Well, I discerned the two vocations kind of together, and I don't recommend that for anybody. I think they are two separate vocations that sometimes can occur in the same person. And it's more usual for somebody to be a sister and be well formed and well established in religious life first, and then be ordained, go to through the process and go to seminary and be ordained, or to be a priest and then enter community. Not so usual to do the two at the same time. I like to think of trying to put it in a really simple way, that being a sister is who I am. It's my real identity. And the priesthood is my ministry, is part of how I'm called to serve the church.
Fascinating. Thank you so much. There was a initial question that I missed to ask from Angela. She asked, do all orders not encourage individual ministries?
I think there are some orders that, um, well, first of all, there are more active orders and more contemplative orders. And a contemplative order will focus mainly on prayer as their primary ministry, and may have hospitality, a ministry of hospitality. There are some orders where a whole group of sisters will do the same thing, will be chaplains or teachers, or, and that's in the early days, orders tended to do one thing. And I think most orders that I'm trying to think now of the women's orders, particularly, um, yeah, I think there's always a discernment process and always a conversation. It's not that anybody can just go off and do whatever we want. If someone comes up with well, for example, I wanted to take the Shalem spiritual direction program. So we had something that was sort of like a Quaker clearness committee. I put together a group of sisters and we did a real discernment process about that. How much time is it going to take? What's it going to cost? How we're going to pay for it? Can I get a scholarship? How much time, how much of my time away from the community, or and what is the benefit for the community? And so we worked through all of that and all sorts of questions before I could go ahead and start the program. Another time, a sister wanted to do a master's degree in theology, not as part of an ordination process. And again, we did a committee discernment about it, and then we decided that she could do it. My experience at the Order of St. Helena is that we very rarely say no. Offhand, I can't think of when we ever said no, but we have to do it within the scope. We have to know what we're getting into, and how much time and how much benefit and how are we going to pay for it. But we've had in the Order of St. Helena, we've had a huge range of ministries. Some are church related, some are lay ministries, like working in a food pantry or teaching in a school that was not a religious school. So yeah, it varies from community to community.
Is there any other questions? And I'll just keep asking questions.
Sure.
I'm so curious. So we live in a very secular world right now. And where do you see the religious order maybe centering us or leading us into more spirit-centered, Jesus-centered life? Is there any way that you can help us do that?
Well, I think part of it is wearing the habit and even if I'm wearing secular clothes, I'll wear my cross, and being out in public with the cross. Now, living in South Carolina, it's not so unusual to be wearing a large cross. But I think it is a witness. We have a neighborhood around where we are. And when we moved here, we had a meeting with the neighborhood so that they would know who we were and that we were going to be here. And one of the questions was, are you going to ring a bell? And we said, yes, we're going to be ringing the bell 4 times a day. And they asked about that. And I said, this is our time of prayer. And when we ring the bell, you could pray too. I said, oh my goodness, wow, oh. And another time, one of the sisters was at the end of our driveway, and somebody was driving by, and he stopped, and he said, do you all pray in there when you ring that bell? And what are you all doing? And she said, yes, we're praying for the world and and he thought about that, and he said, well, God bless you. And then he drove off. So I think sometimes it's just being a witness. Now, one of my ministries has also been interfaith dialogue. And to go out for lunch with one of my Muslim friends in her hijab, and I make a point of wearing my cross, And we're there yucking it up and having a beautiful time. And everybody in the restaurant sees us together. And I think that's a major witness.
Thank you. My other question also is about the breviary. It is meant to be used in a community. It's also meant to be used in a continued prayer. Is there a specific way that you can maybe show us how us individual can make most use out of the breviary or the Psalter?
Right. And there was one thing I forgot to show you. And just give me a minute. We also have an app, which is the OSH Daily Office. And it's you can download it from the App Store or from Google Play. It's a very simple version of the Office, but it does have ordinary time, Advent, Christmastide, Lent, and Eastertide for all 4 offices. And it has some of the major feasts. And it's very simple. When you're praying with the breviary, even the personal breviary, there's a bit of flipping of pages, and it just follows straight through, and it includes the office readings. So this is a really easy way to get started if you're interested in praying with the work that we've done in inclusive language.
That's great. OSH Daily Office.
OSH, right.
In the chat. All right. I think we have 9 minutes left to the time that we have together. Is there any other questions? Any other burning questions?
Actually, I just thought of one other thing of witness. I've also ever since Vietnam, I go to demonstrations. And I go to Gay Pride Parade. I go, and in Augusta, we've been demonstrating once a week for Gaza. And I'll go, either in my collar or go with the cross. And I think, again, that's a witness. It's an important witness.
Yes. Is there something that you can maybe say to those who are struggling with faith currently?
Right. It depends what the struggle, what type of struggle it is. I think that another thing I would say is finding a spiritual director can be really helpful, because that can be somebody who can address what the actual question is for an individual person. And I think that we get a lot of support and community in churches, but there's also a need for a way to be able to go and get some individual attention or individual time with God, which might be on a retreat, either going someplace, or there are also online retreat offerings. And I think sometimes in the time of the biggest struggle with our faith, maybe exactly when we meet Jesus, and that can be the time that can be enormously fruitful in building up our life in faith in God and relationship with Jesus. And I always feel a little funny saying relationship with Jesus, because it sounds so, sort of evangelical or something. But that's what happened to me during the pandemic. We were given we do intercessory prayer for people who ask for prayers. But during the pandemic, it felt like all the normal stuff that happens to people then had an overlay of the pandemic. So somebody's mother died, and we can't hold a funeral because of the pandemic. It layered up to such an extent that I was really, really struggling spiritually myself. And, I found Jesus. I said, I'm going to give this over to Jesus. And that was really an important, for me, I've been in religious life for 20 years. And I felt like I had met Jesus for the first time. So there's always more to grow and to learn. I think, our faith journey is a lifetime journey.
There was a comment from Eric. Thank you for sharing your experience and witness. There are many ways to serve the Almighty and be example of God's love.
Excellent. Oh, it's beautiful.
Sandra had a question. Do you have any sisters who are also daughters of the king, or do you have any relationship with daughters of the king?
We don't have sisters who are all, it just, I think one could be. And we have associates who are also daughters of the king. I remember working with one associate said, can I do both? And I said, sure, of course you can do both. And I've done several retreats for daughters of the king here at local churches. So yeah, wonderful, wonderful girl.
Wonderful. So, how do we get in touch with you?
Okay.
What is the best way to ask you to come join a Zoom call or
Okay,
come
sure.
visit us?
Okay, so we have a general email address, sisters@osh.org, and I can put that in the chat, or somebody can put that
I
in.
can do that. Sisters at
Okay,
osh.org.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, and that comes to me and to our, we call her community leader.
Mhm.
We don't call her superior because at one point, one of our sisters from Africa went home and was talking about our superior. And people said, well, if she's the superior, who's the inferior?
Period.
So we decided we didn't want to have a superior. So that email at sisters@osh.org comes to me and to our community leader.
Right. Do you have any last comment for people who are interested in Episcopal Women's History Project and
Mm.
the women's ministry in the Episcopal Church?
Oh, wow. Well, I have and I'm looking again at this book. I have a dream, and it's not something I could do, but that somebody would write a history of the religious orders in the women's religious orders in the Episcopal Church. I think it would be a fascinating history, and a big contribution because the individual books, tend to focus on just that community, but not what's happening in the church as a whole, how this is contributing to women's ministry overall. So I think that would be a wonderful. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
No, if anyone's planning on writing a book, you know who to email.
looking for a research project.
Yes.
Yeah,
All
and I
right.
suppose someday we'll write our history. This right now is not the time, I think, to do that, but I hope someday we will. And I'll be having fun in the archives in the meantime. I love doing the archives. I love it. It's
You're a
great
born
fun.
librarian. We
Yeah.
also know that. There was a comment. I remember seeing sisters in the Episcopal Cathedral in Louisville when I was growing up. That was very meaningful to me.
Mm.
Mm. Well, thank you, Sister Ellen. Thank you so much for joining us, even at our last minute request. As I said before, this will be recorded and uploaded on our YouTube channel as well as other Lenten series. Please join us next Thursday, and we will continue for 4 more weeks. So thank you all for joining us. I hope you all have an amazing evening. Thank you.
Thank you.